What
Grow a
you,
proper
man?
mustache, bro.
Yeah, fuck yeah, no.
Alright, it
I've got
started.
like
It started.
got three strands on this side, three
I'm
strands on
posting
that
this on
side.
YouTube, whatever you're doing right now.
Ladies, I'm single. Um, yeah. Call me maybe.
Essentially, an article came up today. April, what's the date today, Alan? April
April
the
3rd.
3rd. Yeah, April the 3rd. So our Prime Minister, amazing man, is essentially he made a announcement about international travelers and people on visiting visas such as travel visas, temporary work visas like the working holiday visa, and essentially all student visa students. And essentially we just wanted, I thought it's a good time to talk about what international school life is like in Australia and how international students are treated in Australia. And I invited Alan because he not only provides a good domestic opinion and like a good objective opinion about it as someone who's observed it, but like he's kind of like faced both. Like he only got his PR like what, like 6 years ago or something like that, and then he got his. It took like 10,000 years for him to get his Australian citizenship. So like he provides a good opinion, and that's why I invited him. At the same time, our opinions don't reflect or represent the entire community because I know some people have it worse than I do or have it better than I do. I guess like that's what just hopefully we remember. Yeah. But now that that introduction stuff is out of the way, like Joey, Alan, you know, like for you, you've had it both. Like, do you think like the treatment of what you get as like someone who's international and like even a permanent resident is like miles different?
Um, I think at least for the period before we got permanent residency, it was quite tough in terms of even just things like getting a house, making sure that we were paid properly. But obviously that was a long time ago. You're quite right in saying that I didn't get my citizenship until quite recently, until last year actually, and for that period, especially the period where I was applying for the citizenship, we were keeping track very intently, myself and my family, of the changes that the government were rolling out with regards to things like international student fees, who'd be considered international, what treatment and what delays Chinese people like ourselves were receiving. And it was obviously a lot of stress. Applying for citizenship is already a cause of a lot of anxiety, and I think just seeing that the government, especially from the period of, I think, 2013 to about 2017, so the last Liberal government has really been particularly aggressive with policies that aren't necessarily the most, I guess, accommodating to new citizens, and especially citizens from or people wanting to be citizens from places like China or India. My last few years of high school were spent under this stress that our citizenship wasn't going to come through, and that we'd be consigned to essentially international student status for the rest of our stay in Australia. And I know that there are a lot of families who were and maybe still are in our situation, and honestly I can empathise with how rough the whole process is. So I think even before the whole coronavirus thing kicked in, and before these policy proclamations came in, I think there was always this undercurrent of hostility, or at least of ambivalence towards people like us. So that's how things were before, and I think things aren't necessarily going to get better from this point on.
Yeah, I think what's different for me is that like unlike you, I actually haven't gotten everything, so it's just like, oh well, it's like fucked for me because like already high school fees were already like so bad, like so bad, like 20 grand a year or something like that, when other high school students pay like what, $500 a year, not even that. Like when I reflect on it now, it's like I think how the government sees us, in my opinion, is just we're money. Like we're just like a money investment to them. We're just something that they market pretty much. And I thought it's a bit bad because like I'm putting like a small group of internationals, but like I've been in Australia for this is my 15th year in Australia pretty much. And am I even a permanent resident yet, bro? No, it's like they're just like, oh, nah, sorry, mate, you can't even get it, even though you're pretty much Australian, you know. Like, and I'm pretty sure I have one of the thickest Aussie accents I know as well, and they're just like, nah, you can't get it, mate.
Yeah, exactly.
No pathway for you, and they just cock block you, and like, so many people, like, at least in America, you know, like, you stay in the country for a minimum 10 years, and you still get permanent resident, you know what I mean? And I think that's so much better than like what Australia provided for us, where it's just like, oh yeah, cool, you're loyal, we still want money off you. That's how I interpret it now. Like, to them it's just like, you're our money source and we're not gonna let you go. And that's why I thought, oh, coronavirus hits, surely they'll show some like loyalty to us, you know, as like fucking investors pretty much who've been living in this country for ages. And like, when I saw the article today, I'll get Tim to put it like here or something like that, is like, it's just terrible because he's literally telling us to go back home if we can't afford being here anymore after we get our job cuts. I'm not saying let's like even give us anything. It's just like, I think to use the word prioritize a certain class of people is wrong, because in saying that, you're saying that like, in my opinion, it's a mixture of both positive and negative discrimination. It's saying it's positive discrimination because they're saying that Australians don't have anywhere to fall back onto, whereas they're saying we are, so therefore we don't deserve anything. It's also negative discrimination because they're just cutting us out and just literally giving us the option, leave or just accrue like a huge debt while you're here. And I think that's really unfair, especially for, I think, people who just arrived here as well, who like just settled in and like was just like looking forward to starting the university, high school, or even primary school life, and they're literally getting like destroyed by coronavirus, like their life aspirations. They're just like, now like, I've talked to so many first year students at uni who like, they may not even be international, they're just like, also just like, oh, like uni's become so bad, blah 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 blah. Like, what about the kids who literally moved here for their education? You know, they put more effort in. I think what's attributed to that is like the image that like international students are like so bloody rich, like, and like, I think if they were living back in their countries, then yes, 100% they would be rich. But if you look at the fees they have to pay here, like for med school and like dentistry, it's $100,000 a year and only rising every single year.
Exactly. Yeah.
Who, unless they're a bloody millionaire, they cannot afford that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
So like, we get our parents to pay for our school fees, and then we work for like our rent, our living expenses and all that. And I think it's just unfair to be like, oh nah, you guys have somewhere to fall back onto. Well, if we go back to our countries and we're still not working, then that's still living expenses and other stuff that our parents have to cover for us, on top of the huge bills that they're accruing from the student fees, which they're not even cutting down as well. Like, I understood why they charged us a lot last year, because we used a lot of like chemicals and like biological stuff, at least in biomed at least, that required it to be that expensive. But like, what about this year? All the international students paying for that, and they're not even getting to use it. They're going to be using this virtual campus system.
Yeah, legit. Yeah, no, like honestly, all those issues just relate back to what I was saying before. I think in terms of not necessarily well, this government, but also I think successive Australian governments having a certain attitude, having a certain hostility towards the idea that foreigners can be of the same status as Australians. I think it's rational to, you know, for a government to prioritise the welfare of its own citizens. It's, you know, part of the social contract that the government necessarily has with its people. But obviously, what ScoMo did has been doing in the recent few months is just way overboard. And there's obviously an obligation for you to look after the people within your own borders, people who've been paying, who've been contributing to the educational system, And it's just there's just a massive human cost involved in that. And as you said, like there'd be plenty of people from China, from India, from Korea, even moving here with the hope that this would be a new start for them, and they're just getting confused messaging from the government. They're getting an incredibly weak policy. The uni's not doing much to look after them, and I think a lot of it does come from above. And I think there is genuinely a kind of policy issue inherent in the way that the government's been dealing with these issues before. International students and I guess foreign immigration is something to be exploited economically, and it reflects itself in things like ridiculous fees for you guys versus HECS subsidies for us. So honestly, it seems like it's a case of the chickens coming home to roost. Obviously, incredibly sympathetic on my part towards anyone who's going through citizenship struggles, issues, delays. The department's been pretty nasty in the past, so obviously there's a huge amount of sympathy there. But I think from a sort of broader macro policy perspective, it's completely natural. And as I said, I don't think it'd be. I don't think the situation would improve in any significant way unless either there's a change of government or Scott Morrison has a massive change of heart. Because honestly, the way that I see things going now is that Australia will become even more insular in terms of immigration. Australia will be even more restrictive in terms of how it treats international students, not giving them access financially to services, to I guess protection, whether it's legal or economic, and just things getting worse because there is now this precedent that public health crises like this one can be used to justify things like deportations, justify things like sending people home. So, it's I'm not very optimistic, to be fairly honest. I think there's a lot of great things about Australia. There's a lot of great things about its people, about the way that that our family as immigrants have been treated on this country. But there needs to be recognition that a lot of our country and a lot of the policies that our governments espouse are based on, just centuries of racist attitudes, and a lot of that does reflect into policy, into culture. Call me cynical, but it's honestly the way that things are progressing now.
I feel like, I feel like I suffer less because I feel like, for me, I do like all these other activities that like somehow still at least give me some sort of buck at the end of the day. But like, there's like other international students, like so many out there like that lost their jobs, but they're paying for rent, they're paying for food. They're just like, do I just defer and go back home, or do I just stay and try and like wait out the lockdown 2 months? And it's just like a big dilemma because at the end of the day, everyone likes to say, oh, money doesn't buy you happiness. Well, to a certain extent, it does help out a lot. You know what I mean? And like at the end of the day, like if you're struggling for food, like you're probably gonna do at least something to try and get there. And like that's why it's such a big thing. Is surviving the best thing, or is me just trying to like succeed here the best thing? Like I know I've had that as well. Like when I was in Korea, I was like, oh, maybe I should just go back. Like when I was doing my internship course, maybe I was like, oh, maybe I should just come back and just work with these people forever. But then like so it's just like a huge dilemma, and I think that it needs to be addressed. And I think the Australian governments in the past and even now, and I think even going forward for now, they're still gonna struggle with that. Like I think they don't know how to include foreigners. Like I feel like once they've shown enough loyalty by like staying here, I guess don't give Australian citizenship or even permanent residency to everyone, because that's just kind of stupid, you know what I mean? But if they've shown the like I guess the investment or the loyalty, like how America set their policies up, the 10 years thing, then 100% you should give it to them. Because if you've lived somewhere for 10 years, you essentially came with the intention of living there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, I think, I guess, obviously it's just part of how immigration law and regulations are treated here. It's not something we can change. It's quite unfortunate that the government doesn't hold that as a priority.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think also, it's kind of pointless to be hoping that governments do change, because I know from personal experience, my friends in the student union that I've worked with on campaigns and so on, like I know for a fact that student organisations and cultural organisations and things like that, unions themselves are organising against the government and providing a voice to these people. So I think a lot of the time it's not about hoping that governments in future will take this as a moment to reflect, and obviously I hope they do. Obviously I hope that we can have a government that doesn't engage, whether publicly or subtly, subconsciously, in these kinds of racist attitudes. But at the end of the day, there is still a fight on the ground. A few days ago, the National Union of Students, the NUS, went to the Chancellor of Melbourne Uni, went to the government as well, asking to decrease fees for international students trapped by coronavirus. And it's that kind of organising that I think we do have to still engage in and still be public about it. I'm happy that this is on a public platform. I'm happy that this is going to be aired to people who, even if they don't agree with what we say, can still think about it, because it does start from the ground up. And I'm proud to say that I'm part of a student union that does engage in this kind of activism, this kind of change. But obviously it's a long process, and there's a lot of, I guess, cultural heritage of that kind of discrimination, of that kind of anti-foreign attitude, that xenophobia, essentially, that we need to undo. So, not hopeful, but fingers crossed things will turn out better.
Yeah, I think it's best to end on like a good note, because this is like what it's like being an international student in Australia. And I think like at the end of the day, we talked about a lot of the negatives, like the biggest like negatives of coming here. But at the end of the day, like I still chose to stay because I love Australia. Like in terms of culture and like society wise, it matches with me so well. And like, well, I've been here 15 years, so like obviously it's gonna match with me really well because I'm 18. And I think what you get out of Australia is that like you learn a new sense of freedom, in my opinion, like that you can't really get, at least from Asian culture, and certainly not like, especially Central Asia and like African culture, where like it's less, I guess, expressive over there and like a bit more, I guess, shut down. So like I feel like Australia gave me like a new sense of freedom that I couldn't sense anywhere else. And I feel like once you come here, it's just like a very new experience. I feel like even for you came when you were really young as well. It's just like when you come here, adjusting's really hard, but like adjusting anywhere is really hard in general. Like it's a whole different culture, and like you're different, so they're gonna ostracize you in some way, definitely. Like at the end of the day, if you adjust, like I feel like the racist like talks, like coming back to that, like I think it is like something that's bad when it comes to like these sorts of situations like coronavirus. But I feel like on an everyday scale, like I stopped noticing like those racist remarks maybe like 6 or 7 years ago. And I feel like it's been a very long time for me, at least for me. Maybe not you, maybe not anyone else in Australia, but like I feel like I stopped noticing that like maybe 5-6 years ago, around the start of high school. Like in primary school, I was like, who do these guys think they are? Like calling me like Kim Jong Un, like, or Asian yellow. But like I never really like felt that. Like I feel like it was, and like maybe it's not right to make jokes like this. Maybe other people might think so. But like I think it was just a joke, and like just how they get close to me was like what we call banter, pretty much. You know what I mean? I feel like, so I think Australia in that sense, it's like they're more like, it's not, sometimes like they're not being racist, they're just more like they don't feel the need to walk around eggshells with you. Like they expect you to like, I guess, insult them back, when it's really not an insult. It's more just like, I don't know, I feel like it's taken out of proportion a little bit. And I think in like dire cases like this, it is pretty bad. But at the same time, in our situation, it's like in our everyday life, like Melbourne Uni, UNSW, USyd, it's pretty decent. Like I think I'd still, even after all that criticism that we had before this, I'd still fully recommend coming to Australia. And like if you want a fresh start, because I think Australia, yes, on the government scale, it's not very welcoming, but I think as a people and as a culture, it is still very open and very accepting of people, regardless of your background. I think that's very good. If you want to add anything to that.
100%. I think obviously coming from, I guess coming from my own background, experiences, even viewpoints, I think I do notice, as you correctly identify, I do notice a lot of the incidents of racism in my personal life, and I'm still affected by things like that. I think there is a difference between banter, between making fun of cultural stereotypes that we may share, versus, I guess, comments directed at us maliciously. I think overall Australia is very welcoming towards immigrants. For every one racist comment, about go back to China, something about eating dogs, eating cats, whatever, I've gotten 10 more saying, you're a great guy, you're a mate, we want you here. And I think obviously I can't speak for people who are marginalised in Australia. I think there's a long way to go, particularly with how we treat refugees, particularly with how we treat the Indigenous, the First Nations people of our country. I think it's quite shameful, some of the policies we've had. But as an immigrant, I guess I'm conscious enough to recognise that I do have a certain degree of privilege, and that I am privileged enough to have that kind of upbringing, and I'm privileged enough to be in a society where people and around people that do recognise that racism against immigrants, racism against foreigners, isn't the right thing to do.
Yeah, we'll end the video there. If you guys want to see Alan again, he's in my Chancellor's video. He's a smart guy, very smart, very intelligent. Oh, ew. So, ew. He's also in my first ever video, the Biomedicine Ball vlog. He was a bit derogatory in that, so maybe he's not the best person for this video after all.
Just a bit.
And he's gonna be in my series, Let's Learn Chinese with Isaac, and he's gonna be the first teacher.
Oh god. No, I'm not looking forward to that. That's gonna be a shit show.
Kaixing Zhengshini. Yeah, I'll be looking forward to that as well, filming that with Alan. It'll be in a Skype format like this, because Australia's under lockdown, guys. Yeah. It's alright. We'll see you guys soon. Bye bye.